Yes, this is a red alert. I am absolutely writing a digital rights bill. Now, whether that turns into the licensing argument or ownership argument, it's going to be pretty much up to the internet. And depending on who has the stronger argument, I will argue on that behalf. Now, you might be saying, why am I doing that? Because one, I'm disabled. Two, the thing that I am doing is going to affect everybody. So everyone should have an input in this. And then three, I hope I'm able to present this to Talarico. You can make damn sure that I'm going to give it my best shot because, much like the voting in November, I'm going to make sure I'm there, whether I'm suffering or not. So, but this is in case I don't, that this gets spread and it gets talked about, and maybe someone else can bring this up to one of their representatives. Because also, when I bring this to Talarico, or even if I have to go a little bit under, there's no guarantee that's going to affect all of the United States. This might be just specifically be Texas, because we have very lackluster laws on protecting our ownership rights. So I have a lot of maneuvering that I can move with. I don't know how any other state's going to do it. And then, of course, if this goes into, if this is represented to the Senate and, of course, the state representatives, they have to vote on it. And, of course, corporations are going to try to fight against it. So I am looking at every avenue I can to make sure that my argument is lock solid. Having said that, this is only the first draft, so there's already a lot of holes in it. I'm working on it. The reason why I'm telling it now, and it's going to be premature, is because I'm going through some stuff with my family right now. I think it's getting resolved real fast, but the last 2 days I've gotten like 2 hours of sleep and I'm exhausted. So, and I have a feeling I got probably a couple more days of this. So there's a lot going on. So I am prematurely releasing this so that way the internet can argue over it. Just know I have other points that are not written down that is already somewhere on the internet. So like I have a playlist called Fighting for Consumers. I have a lot of videos as well as arguments I've heard on the internet. You know, making arguments to why we should have our digital ownership and how PlayStation and Xbox and others are taking away our rights to ownership of our goods. Even though in my argument that you will hear, digital and physical goods are the exact same. But there is an easier argument to be made of just making it a licensing argument. If you want to fight for the ownership part, that's going to take a lot more effort. But the licensing, I think I have a pretty solid, good argument. So, before we get into that, I do have to read a few definitions because I've been having to do deep research because I know, especially with me being in politics and reading all of the bills that I dislike and trying to read the big bullshit bill. I know how they talk now, and so I'm making sure that not only do I not talk like that because they make it very confusing on purpose and then they jam cram everything in it. I try to make it representable to a person who can read it and understand it. So I'm having to look at definitions to make sure that I am defining things correctly, I am interpreting things correctly, and to make sure that there can be no other interpretations that they can pick and choose which definitions they want to follow. So I've written down a few of the same definitions to make sure I cover my bases. Now again, it's unfinished. So for example, I have exhaustion of rights that I recently learned. And I learned that from the Supreme Court case Impression Products Inc. versus Lexmark International, which had to do with printers and how another company was making their own, um, I guess, ink cartridge, where the company that made the computer or the printer was arguing that no, you have to buy our cartridges and there's no replacing it. Well, the people that were making other cartridges, they won because once the the rights, the IP rights is sold to the consumer, they physically can no longer have um, a presence in what a person does to that that equipment. Hence, the exhaustion of rights. Once you sell it, it's done. The problem being is that this is specifically for physical stuff, and I know that people treat digital as different, and I want you to hear my argument against that because I do believe that digital and physical goods are the exact same and should be treated as such and should have the protections of each rights. So then another definitions that I haven't looked into yet is personal property definitions, and that's because another definition brought me to this location. So I'm trying to connect the dots, which we'll get into. So this is the first part of my argument. This is where I'm fighting for the permanent license, not a digital ownership right. So I'll get to that in a moment. So let me read what I have for the digital license. My argument has nothing to do with changing, augmenting, taking from, owning the IP, transferring beyond the network host and the consumer, or owning the right of that IP, but to use the license when a product no longer needs, requires, relies on the network to be able to use that license. A license to be used in perpetuity, no matter what happens between the corporation's agreements, contracts, and licensing deals. The corporations and the individual consumer should be separated, as the consumer has no say on the business dealings of said corporations. Only as a consumer can we as individuals can decide what to buy/purchase. This is what Sony is telling the consumer. The store does not say rent. It states clearly on each product that has a price tag, purchase. For a permanent license to exist, no more update is required for a period, and I put 5 years, but I think I'm being too generous, so that's negotiable. But I put 5 years of time. DLCs do not count as you are adding code to the existing code that doesn't need maintaining. Cannot a company cannot update a game to make the game rely on the service provided. Sorry, my throat's already getting scratchy. Too early for my nerves to do that. So let me rewind it. DLCs do not count as you are adding code to the existing code that doesn't need maintaining. Corporations cannot update update a game to make the game rely on the service provided. And I put i.e. if the detailed box says online play optional, it should be able to be ready to play if internet connection is cut. However, if a DLC update breaks the main game that was finished, then the service is required to fix the mistake that the manufacturer caused, like when products are needing a recall to fix an issue. The problem I can see with the description above is a re-release, though it can be rectified by the adjustment of the platform. Example, Black Ops 1 and 2 originally released for 360 and PS3. Do we consider this new code? And thanks to the hacking situation, does this mean it needs maintenance? Therefore, the license is temporary until the company stops, gives up, and / not worth the money anymore. Clear answer. This is still not a live service as the multiplayer is optional and there were bots created to simulate an online experience. So even if a company wants to abuse this system, the permanent license will always be there waiting for activation. And I know that it costs a pretty penny to update these games. Now, of course, back in the day, I think it was like around $10,000 per update, so people were very finicky and very slow when it came to updates on those games. So I definitely think, I'm not sure, and of course the lawyers, if I talk to lawyers, will find that out, is if it still costs that much. Because if it does, they're paying a lot every time they update it to make sure that the or the 5 year licensing thing gets renewed for another 5 years. So they can extend it if they want, but it's going to cost them every time. So just know there is no ironclad rules that we can make to make sure that no abuse happens. There will always be a loophole somewhere, and that is the loophole that I've discovered in my argument. So I don't know how to close that yet, and I don't know if I'm willing to close it because corporations do still need a say in some of this. Even though they are abusive and don't deserve it, they definitely don't deserve it. But I'm always willing to slight compromise, which is why I made this licensing agreement or licensing argument. The reason why the argument is being made with license and not ownership is it's much harder to argue over ownership of an IP based off code. An example query: do we own the car that we bought, or have we been granted permission through a commerce exchange of value that once paid in full, we get to keep the product for in perpetuity? And that's the argument that in the case of Impressions Product Inc. versus Lexmark International came argued for, is that if it's in the contract, then they have more say. But because it's what did I say? I think it's right here at the end. Companies known as acquire empty Lexmark cartridges. Hold on, I'm reading. I'll have timestamps anytime I pause to make sure that you can skip over. Okay. Okay. Yeah. I think I found it. Okay. So beginning with the return program cartridges that Lexmark sold domestically, the Federal Circuit held that a patentee may sell an item and retain the right to enforce through patent infringement lawsuits clearly communicated lawfully restrictions on post-sale use or resale. Because Impressions Products knew about Lexmark's restrictions and those restrictions did not violate any laws, Lexmark Sales did not exhaust its patent rights and it could sue Lexmark sold abroad. The Federal Circuit held that when a patentee sells a product overseas, it does not exhaust its patent rights over the item. I'll find the correct statement. That only kind of answered it. It wasn't exactly what I was looking for, but it's there. Okay, I put it down. I don't know why I didn't just continue reading. Like the lawsuit Impressions Product Inc. versus Lexmark International Inc. Once the patent is sold, the owner of said patent can no longer control that patent as the patent becomes exhausted. And of course, and then I read the passage that was right after that. So that's why it didn't make total sense. Through coding, however, the above detail becomes a little complicated, with data needing updating through the host, and I put Sony in parentheses, network and its servers. The argument of owning gets harder, but the company of the IP holder has to prove that the code is live and not set, as in the game, and then a parentheses product to make it more broad, released in 100% completion and does not need, in quotations, to be upkept. This detail is helped by in the description, and online play is optional or mandatory. That is the key difference. Okay, that's what I have for the licensing agreement. I think there's a stronger argument for to keep the licensing agreement, as in we keep the license for in perpetuity. If we're not arguing on the ownership of the IP or its rights, we won't be infringing on it unless the game developer allows us, like with Bethesda, where they give away their modding tools to so you can mod Skyrim and all that. So unless the develop or like this game, I think this game has a modding thing that people can go and make new maps or whatever they wanted, scenarios. However, now for the argument of digital versus is digital equal as physical. So there is an argument to be made here. And let me just go ahead and read it to you right now. So this is the argument on owning a digital good instead of just the license. If correctly argued, there is an assumption to be made that there isn't a difference. Using war as an example, anything physically kinetic can disrupt or dismantle anything digital and its traffic. For example, using both Russia and Iran's conflicts, Russia specifically, and I put in parentheses, Iran has the option, has used its shadow fleet to drop an anchor and have it damage the communication lines at the ocean depths. Same with the Strait of Hormuz. If Iran decided, it could cut the Middle East from all digital communications, because if you look at there's a certain map, I don't know what it's called, but it keeps track of all our digital communication lines that are under the depths of the ocean. There's a lot of lines that are in the Hormuz that they can easily just control and cut it all if they wanted to. They have ease of access. And I'm using communication to include the digital trade of goods, whether you're talking stocks, entertainment, money, TOSs and EULAs, or digital contracts. The digital trade can be cut off by many scenarios. If you've seen our space map, we have covered our skies in satellite junk. If any enemy is desperate enough or thinks it's a bright idea, can fire a physical missile to a physical dish, causing a movie gravity type scenario, and creates many physical debris that is flying around 17,900 miles per hour. It will disrupt any digital communication, which will include these live service apps like Netflix or HBO. If a person decides to go to these data centers and gets past security and uses a sledgehammer on those servers, wouldn't the data/code be cut off and or destroyed? So the digital code physically exists, does it not? And then I didn't get to finish my argument, but I was going to also add, when you purchase something, you use your credit card, a physical credit card that you have to physically input the numbers into the digital store of Sony, so that way your physical money that's in your bank can be digitally transferred to Sony's bank, so they can physically have it and give you back the digital good that you just bought. You see how I'm circling around it? So there is an argument, a very strong argument to be made about owning a digital right. The easier argument is to argue for the license. The harder argument, but there is a strong argument, is to argue that we do own our digital goods. So this next thing that I put on here is unfinished because this is one of those things that, which is why I worry about me arguing on the people's behalf and why I get angry when I hear of like Angry Joe, Skill Up, Matty Plays, and any gaming news channel that where they report the news on do absolutely nothing as they make a video pretending that they're doing something and then nothing happens and then they get mad the next video saying, oh, we're losing more of our rights. What can we do? So it's been incumbent upon me to make this argument for the internet. But this is my worry, is because sometimes my brain just collapses and I don't get to finish my thoughts. So, having said that, I'm going to read this half page before my thoughts completely blanked. So, this is an argument on, and I made this argument on Blue Sky, which I'll see if I can post it, but I know YouTube's been blocking me. That you can only post YouTube videos. So, but I do have evidence of this, and I have argued this extensively on this behalf. And once I reach to my second draft and third draft, I'll definitely be re-looking at all my posts that I made about the video games and re-listening to all my arguments I made in the past. So my post on Blue Sky that argues against the person definition. So this is one of my major arguments. A consumer and a corporation that relies on network are entirely different definements. The Sony PlayStation Corporation is a network host. A host is any hardware device that has the capability of permitted access to a network via a user interface or any other means. A corporation cannot have what a person is required, and that is inalienable rights. Unlike a person, a corporation needs to be strictly controlled to make sure that a person of inalienable rights cannot be discriminated against. I think I created a shortcut to it. So let's see. Let's see if I can read that. Let's see, Blue Sky profile. Yes, I did. Okay, cool. It's gonna jump me right to the post. Okay, and I try to, and actually I made a YouTube video on this. I try to tag the lawyer Brian and Legal Eagle. I try to, of course, it didn't get any traction. I think only 2 people saw it, which is fine. I know my stuff gets blocked. I'm not upset about that. But I'm trying to make the argument that we can't get rid of Citizens United until we change the definition of a person. So this is what I wrote in my post. I'm going to make a vid on this thought, but people are now understanding how Citizens United needs to be overturned. The only way I can see this happening is if we change the legal term for person. And an entity is not a person. A corporation does not have inalienable rights, unlike a person. A corporation needs to be controlled strictly to make sure that a person of inalienable rights cannot be discriminated against, no matter the sex, or orientation. The entity is not a person who can speak. It requires a spokesman of that entity to speak on its behalf. A corporation has to have many persons in order for the entity to exist. Without a person, a corporation does not exist. The problem with changing the definition of persons in corporate speak is that it's been like this since the Roman era. They coined the term and defined it. That would be the challenge. But as long as corporate has the right of a person, Citizens United will exist again under a new name. So let me open up this. So I'm using Cornell Law School for my source. So this is a definition of a legal person. A legal person is a human or a non-human legal entity that is treated as a person for legal purposes. A legal person is capable of engaging in all usual legal business that a real person can participate in, such as suing, being sued, owning property, and entering into contracts. The concept of legal personhood is especially popular in business law, where business organizations like corporations, partnerships, and limited liability companies possess legal personhood. As a result, these statutorily created entities are able to be treated as legal, distinct from their shareholders and officers. And there's more, of course, but you get the gist of it. And then read the definition of inalienable rights, or inalienable. Inalienable means something that is not transferable, or that is... Oh, shit. There's a roach. That surprised me. How much time do I got? Okay, I got plenty of time. There's a roach here. Oh man, it lived. Okay, I got it. I was on the roll. The roach came out of nowhere. Okay, I took care of it. That's funny. Anyway, means something that is not transferable or that is impossible to take away. Every constitution provides for fundamental rights which are inalienable rights. For example, the California Constitution Inalienable Rights Clause, which is important because Sony's TOS mentions that you have to follow California's law in order to, sue them or not sue them. I read the TOS. I have a video on that as well. California Constitution's Inalienable Rights Clause provides that all people are by nature free and independent and have inalienable rights. As such, according to the Constitution of California's freedom of a person is a right that is impossible to take away, which contradicts what a corporation as a person is defined as. Because if a corporation, which is... It's starting to change a little bit because of Trump, but a corporation cannot, and I mentioned this in the Blue Sky, that it cannot discriminate based on sex, religion, or orientation. And of course, when Trump issued the DEI claim and all the Republicans went for it, of course, they got rid of a bunch of people, and then, yada, yada, yada. We know. So now let's discuss my weakness in my argument, and that has to do with Citizens United, and it's because I feel like the argument can be flipped, which is why, again, I want to argue on the licensing because I feel like that's easier versus ownership. But if the people want the ownership, I can argue for it, and I will argue my damnedest. So this is the weakness of my argument. This is the unknown argument that will challenge the definitions that we are accustomed to. I fear this argument, as by today's usage, could be used to backhand any arguments I put forth, and that's the definition on how we use person that is connected to Citizens United. The argument that will be made is turning normal citizens into many, many corporations, as Citizens United has combined the definitions of a person and a corporation into one. My stance will challenge this notion, and losing will cement all legal definitions permanently. If argument is successful, it would change the entire status quo and would need to adjust many rulings, including the Citizens United ruling. That's what I got as far as argument is concerned. Of course, again, this is basically all new arguments I made, people haven't heard about. I've made tons of other arguments that I am prepared to jot down and make it legible so that way I can present this to, of course, Talarico or, any state representative that represents Texas. But that's why I'm talking about this now, so that way the word can spread and we can argue on the details of what I'm writing down, or you can make your own for your own state and then argue for your state's behalf. Because I can only speak for Texas unless Talarico manages to get it in Congress. I don't think I need to read the definitions that I wrote down. I definitely keep it, but I definitely have purchase definitions and I have buying definitions. That multiple definitions where I make sure I cover all of my bases. So that's what I got jotted down, and then of course I'll post below my entire playlist of what I've come up with so far, as well as what I've seen on the internet. There is an argument to be made for digital ownership, as because we do own physical stuff. So why can't we own digital stuff if anything physical can affect the digital realm, the digital space? And there's a lot of things that can affect it, because I didn't even get to talking about what space can do to our satellites or our electricity. Like, we haven't even touched, I think it's called the Harrington, the Harrington something, where it was like, I think 1800s, or it might have been early 1900s, where the sun did an extra large burst of sun rays at Earth, and it like blew up generators and stuff like that. The Harrington event, I think it's called. And then, of course, I can name any number of space phenomenon that could happen. And then, of course, if we're going to argue about space, I would argue on behalf of NASA without NASA being present, where I would look up how much does NASA space look at. And if it's like what the movie Armageddon says, where they only see like 11% of their sky, clearly we're not going to catch something, and something could go awry because we're giving 11% chance that we will catch it. But that was a long time ago. And then, of course, Elon Musk probably ruined NASA with his SpaceX projects and all that. I'm paying attention to all this shit. So I hope I made my argument very clear. And of course, if you want to argue on anything that I have said and will say, you have to do your own research and look at the videos that I have posted. I've done my research. I've done my my own investigations, like when the PSN, when they did it twice now, where they took away movies. I did my own investigation to make sure that we own our games. And up until now, we do. If your internet gets cut off, I've been able to play my games offline for 31 days, which is past the 30-day temporary license that when you first purchase, it activates within 15 days. Is that confusing? Yes, but it makes sense if you repeat that in your head. So within 15 days, there's a temporary license. And if your internet gets cut off within 15 days, the 30-day activates, and that's when you need a licensing check. But I've done 31 days of gaming, which means any new purchases did get blocked, but any old purchases, it wasn't blocked. I was able to play it just fine on the 31st day. And I recorded all of it. And if it does get down to the courts, I can also redo the process again. I'd be happy to do another however many days they want me to be offline. I can do it. I've tested this thoroughly. Oh man. So that's it. That's what I got. Been arguing this for 2 years now. way over 2 years, but as far as dedication, 2 years. So that's what I got so far. I hope you have some deep thoughts. I hope you smoke some and ponder what I have said and decide what you want me to argue for and or what's the best course of action. I still have a lot of lawsuits I need to read. I know there's 3 particular ones that I need to read, and I mentioned them before, though I've lost the URLs. But luckily, I recorded what I needed to look up, so I just need to find the video that I recorded, and look up those cases. And then, of course, if I can think of others, I will look up those cases as well. But that's what I got. So I hope you I hope you enjoyed. I hope you got well informed, and I hope that I'm in the right course. If not, tell me. But of course, again, you would have to do your own due diligence research, as I've made a lot of arguments already beyond what I just read.